Morning, I'm ACCP Lawson. Today's the start of, it marks the launch of our annual campaign to get the message across that driving with either drink or drugs in your system is unacceptable. So we're here at a roadside check site in Preston on a busy road. We've got officers who are pulling over motorists passing by, checking out for general potential offences when they're driving, but particularly people who might have drink or drugs in the system. The problem is that when people are involved in a collision where they injure or at worst kill somebody, that devastates lives and the impact that has. So we're doing roadside checkpoints between now and the new year to increase our activity. We do it every day, but increasing activity at this time of year. We're also intelligence-led, so where the public tip us off about other people driving with drink or drugs in the system, we'll act on that. But the message is simple, that we are here to keep the roads in Lancashire as safe as possible.
Just couldn't comprehend that it would be Pete. I had to get the chief to repeat it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, he was such a fit and healthy and full of life guy, and I'm just devastated for his wife. I can only imagine what she and his family and friends are going through this morning.
Hello all, and welcome back to Mind Juice. The title of this piece, Scripted Tragedy, Accident and Natural Causes, primarily aims to further reveal and uncover Paul and Emma's frame on the search and investigation for Nikki Bulley, a faulty projection as a sincere partner and close friend. Letting on they were genuinely seeking answers, meanwhile pitching this she vanished into thin air riverwire narrative. I will further demonstrate today, using Paul and Emma's own words, that such was and is merely a staged story, in absolute vain to Nicola's name, designed to deflect, divert, and distract away from the actual truth here. Nicola was missing from home. I just may have caught on to Emma's biggest slip-up yet. But before I get into that, first and foremost, I will be addressing Assistant Chief Constable Peter Lawson's recent and sudden passing, which, after review of the circumstances, a 50-year-old, healthy and fit guy, has been deemed to be due to natural causes. Also to note, I will comment briefly on Gaynor Lord, the missing mom who went missing after leaving work early in Norwich near River Wensum this past Friday, an area nearly 200 miles southeast of St. Michael's. I will be monitoring that case as it continues to unfold. Very odd circumstances surrounding her going missing as well. Ironically though, the police this go around are cordoning off wide spanned areas of the park in question. You observe a tent, and were actually quite quick to provide numerous photos recently and live CCTV footage from numerous sources to the public. Definitely working on that public-police relationship. But hey, that's a good thing. Now, to keep things moving along here, this past Sunday, December 10th, I was amidst conversation with a family member, I remember, when I received a notification on my phone which read, "It comes with great sadness. Lancashire Constabulary today announces the death of Assistant Chief Constable Peter Lawson. He was 50 years old, having passed away this morning at his home address. At this time, his death is believed to be medically related and has been referred to the coroner." Wow. Wait. What? So now, we have SIO Becky Smith retiring 2 to 3 weeks prior to the College of Policing report being released, and now the Assistant Chief Constable lead Golden Commander designated the Nikki Bulley case, suffering a sudden medically related death at just 50 years old, 2 weeks thereafter. That now leaves the two lead public Lancashire Constabulary representatives on this case no longer with the force. Also to include the chief officer dismissing as well. The College of Policing review consensus, released just a few weeks back now, suggests that the handling was exemplary, exhibiting the very best of policing. Yet, 2 to 3 of the top hierarchical figures associated with the case's management, for one reason or the other, are no longer a part of said exemplary front. They cease to exist within the force. Can such be merely coincidental? I think not. Then, 2 days, 48 hours go by after Mr. Lawson's passing. Tuesday, December 12th, we learned via the Daily Mail, which, to note, was released prior to official word from the Lancashire Constabulary themselves, It has been confirmed that there will be no requirement of an inquest into Mr. Lawson's death, stating that he died from natural causes. Then, the following day, December 13th, the Lancashire Constabulary finally officially posted an update. Following the tragic death of Assistant Chief Constable Peter Lawson at the weekend, His Majesty's Senior Coroner for Lancashire and Blackburn with Darwin has reviewed the circumstances. It has now been established that Peter died from natural causes and funeral arrangements will be made in due course. His Majesty's Senior Coroner has confirmed there is no requirement for an inquest. Reviewed the circumstances. It has now been established. No further requirement for an inquest. With all due respect, I want to comment here, to be very clear. The only thing that has been established is that nothing attached to this case, released by the Lancashire Constabulary, can be trusted. Everything has been tilted from step one to best their image. They even express this themselves in the independent external review. Each presser, lack of briefings, coordination, the working hypothesis, the tunnel-visioned, biased investigation was all smeared as exemplary, representative as the best of policing. Now, Peter was the lead gold commander on the case, wherein one Nikki Bulley mysteriously had an accident, despite all of the circumstances blatantly suggesting otherwise. They still hold true to this day. She definitely could not have been found sooner. Why should anyone believe their findings or established conclusions here and now with the death of Assistant Chief Constable Lawson? The timing was awfully coincidental. He was 50 years young, and you heard the Crime and Police Commissioner himself again offering up another verbal wrench into the mix. You can always count on that guy to utter something strange, and I quote, as you witnessed in the beginning, "He was a healthy and fit guy. I just couldn't believe it would be Pete. I had to ask the Chief Constable again." Well, aren't you and that Chief Constable all chummy and buddy-buddy? I had to ask the Chief Constable again. I couldn't and didn't believe it. This demonstrates their relationship, or personal relations, are more than merely just being professional. They're tight. And I'm curious, Mr. Snowden, you couldn't believe it would be Pete? What? You couldn't believe it would be Pete whom suddenly succumbed to natural causes? Question mark? It would be being the operative words here. You couldn't believe it would be Pete, as if it would be and had to be someone at all? So you anticipated hearing of a death and or are not surprised, you suggest with your own words, but you just couldn't believe it would be Pete. More like you anticipated someone taking the fall, taken out, left to pay for the debacle, but you just couldn't believe it would be Pete. Now, to clarify, I am not trying to be too analytical here or looking too far into it, but time and time again, Mr. Snowden's words and choices of expressions don't sit right with me. Something is off with that dude, I'm telling you. He intentionally emphasizes specific words when he speaks as if to drive particular aspects and point home to be more believable every single time. It reeks of a dirty, gaslighting politician to me. In that opening clip, you hear him say, "I can't even imagine." Like he really overdoes it, but it's not sincere whatsoever. Just consider this. Mr. Lawson was the chief lead designated gold commander per the independent external review on this case, whom had a responsibility, a direct strategic role in decision making all throughout this case, which would be evidenced in the IER. He was in fact critiqued for electing Becky to be the one to speak at the presser, because the original Stables lady suddenly fell ill. So he elects Becky, despite Becky, contesting such could potentially compromise her role, which, in all fairness, in hindsight, was accurate. She was right, because it indeed did. That is the sole reason I looked into her entire passion for covert and secret policing outside the eyes of the public, high-end tactics, right? That was his call, despite being encouraged to instead use a more senior officer instead of Becky Smith. In that very College of Policing report, they highlight this aspect of the case as his fault, his responsibility, his shortcoming. That is the vulnerability drop. That's very important to keep in mind, everyone. The CEO of the College of Policing, Andy Marsh, says it himself. The biggest problem with this case was the release of the vulnerabilities. Those came from Becky. And you hear at one point Lawson express, as Becky stated, something about vulnerabilities. She was put in that place, in that position, in front of that microphone by Peter Lawson. It backfired immensely. This, in the eyes of the review, was the biggest problem with the case going off the rails. Now, you have a healthy and fit 50-year-old suffering a sudden medically related episode deemed to be natural causes. Just so happens to take place in the wake of this very case. His direct and influential decision-making involvement was such. In my opinion, that alone is and are circumstances demanding further inquiry. Side note, I find it important to note and emphasize here, my comments do not come without careful consideration. I do extend my sincerest condolences to Mr. Lawson's family and friends, those grieving his loss at this time. What follows and came before is considered with all due respect, and in no way is intended nor meant to convey any form of disrespect whatsoever. Now, in the intro clip, we observe Assistant Chief Constable Peter Lawson recently discussing the force's holiday strategy pertaining to drinking and driving, which, yes, is completely unrelated to the Nikki Bulley case. However, such does provide insight and depict one of his latest public appearances I was able to track down, taking place on December 1st, just 9 days prior to his passing. Now, my first thoughts upon hearing the news of Mr. Lawson were he did not appear to be ailing and or succumbing to any sort of long-term illness, it would seem, considering both the February presser wherein he was alongside SIO Becky Smith, nor even the one I just discussed and you saw in the opening in the drinking and driving bit back on December 1st. With that said, being this chief top-ranking officer, golden commander in the Nikki Bulley case, I would imagine he would have had top-tier benefits in regard to health coverage, regular checkups and physicals, right? Wouldn't that be a requirement of the Constabulary? I don't know. I'm just asking. I guess what I'm saying is I'm confused. How are the circumstances not alarming? Natural causes? Let's briefly break this down, the context of such ruling. Thanks to Mr. Adeley, also titled His Majesty's Coroner, I think it is in fact necessary, for he deemed Nicola's fate an accident on pure hypothetical conjecture, premised upon an absolute fallible basis of scientific knowledge, wherein zero objective evidence is substantiated by data. With that said, why should one trust His Majesty's Coroner this time, a death in the wake of Nicola's, directly attached to a case that is still to this day ever unraveling and experiencing non-stop rain in regards to scrutiny? Again, Lawson was critiqued and made the scapegoat, per the IER, the one at fault, given his position and authority for what the College of Policing concluded to be the biggest problem with the case, the vulnerability decision. That, everyone, is again and are true, in fact, circumstances. The scope and definition, let's get a little technical here, of natural causes is as follows, and I quote, "If someone dies of or from natural causes, they die because they are ill or old, rather than because of an accident or violence." Like I said, he didn't appear to be suffering from any long-term ailing illness, and he's definitely not considered old. It's explained here. All right. I have a few articles here. Well, this is from The Health, which is a medical journal, as well as one from CNN, and I want to talk about this cause of death thing. Typically, let's say if we had an older man or woman who dies in their sleep and they're 88 years old or early 90s and someone finds them, right? That would likely be deemed death by natural causes. No need to look further into it because of age, typical process, lifespan, body, right? But in this case, the circumstances of his professional involvement in the case, the fact that they're deeming it death by natural causes, no need for further inquiry, is what's suspicious. Because he's 50, as Snowden says, he's healthy and fit, and the timing and coincidence of the stress that he's under and the position he's in. And I think it's important to point out, under the Chief Constable, Chris Rowley, there's 3 separate Assistant Chief Constables. Peter Lawson was designated himself as the Public and Uniform Operations Specialist. Him alone, whom was in charge for managing and setting the tone of public perception related to large events or high-profile cases. As of late, his most recent, the Nikki Bulley case, right? As I said in the IER, he was pinned for the decision-making strategy of selecting Becky. The College of Policing states this is where the case went off the rails. He has a lot of heat under his hiney. They're kind of using him as a fall guy. Imagine if inquiry were reopened into this case. Who would be the first person that they would seek out to follow up as far as this case goes? The gold commander on the case, which would be him. He's no longer there. Now hear me out. And to point out the Lancashire Police's page, the Majesty's Senior Coroner for Lancashire and Blackburn with Darwin has reviewed the circumstances, which the circumstances alone demand further inquiry, in my opinion. Has now been established he died from natural causes. His Majesty's Coroner has confirmed there's no requirement for inquest. That means that they're saying he's a late 80s, early 90s who died in his sleep. There's nothing suspicious. He died of natural causes. Because natural causes is vague, okay? But the circumstances in this case alone make it suspicious. What dying by natural causes means, while there isn't a medical definition for natural causes, it generally means that there is no acute cause of death. You may have heard of celebrities or people in your community dying of natural causes, but have you ever wondered what that exactly means? Is the term only used if people die at an old age? It turns out to be a bit more complicated. Here's how the experts explain. That was my general consensus. When I think of natural causes, I think of older age. What does dying of natural causes mean? It's important to point out up front that dying of natural causes isn't a medical term. A pathologist states it's more of a term used to communicate amongst the medical community to the public so that they don't have to get into specifics, right? It's kind of the public's explanation. It doesn't really get into all the finite details. Usually dying from natural causes is interpreted as nothing acute happened. And this means that nothing sudden or severe happened. There's no external signs that would indicate anything other than. A death certificate will state more than whether a death was natural or not. The certificate will indicate the immediate or final cause of death and any underlying issues or conditions that led to the death, which is important. While there isn't necessarily a set definition for what constitutes natural causes, an internal medicine physician states that they can generally agree, physicians that is, on what it does mean. It is a wide term that can be anything that wasn't an accident or affected by force. We don't pin a death from natural causes on one thing like a heart attack or a stroke. Things just sort of stop. And to be honest, my first takeaway was that it was cardiac related. Arrest, arrhythmia, something of the sort. Not necessarily a stroke, because in my opinion, you would see like an ambulance or was at the hospital when he passed. Because a stroke tends to have a slower onset, right? Where emergency EMTs would have the opportunity to intervene. Even if in critical condition, there would still be a ambulance hospital. Not necessarily, I'm just suggesting. Determining what is considered a natural death. There is some nuance here, and technically things like heart attack, cancer, and infections could be considered natural given that they happen to people without any outside force. It basically means that death was not due to a non-natural event such as suicide or homicide. And see, that's the whole point that I think the Lancashire Constabulary wants here, is they don't want any speculation that it was anything but natural. So, natural causes. If it was a homicide, like I said, given the circumstances, the knowledge he knows, the information, what he was privy to, we would never know and we'll never find out. It would be completely covered up. A hit of some sort, we would never know. Suicide, I believe the same would be the case. Could that have been something to where, the walls were caving in, the stress got to him, he didn't want to deal with it, maybe he was in on something, but he just didn't want the identity to come out. I'm not saying that he was. I don't mean to speculate on the poor man. Rest in peace. Or maybe even it was separate and apart. Let's say he lost 100,000 pounds gambling the night before and he just couldn't face it. It wouldn't matter. If it was something along those lines, an election of self-fate, again, like homicide, we would never know and they would never tell us. Just simply because of the unraveling further that it would cause. End-of-life researcher, chief medical officer, and chief executive stated that the term natural causes is usually used when someone dies of old age. And Peter Lawson is 50 years old. Didn't appear to be ailing from anything long-term. And as Snowden says, he seemed to be healthy and fit. There's usually an absence of overriding disease, long-term ailing aspect. Dr. McNeely compared dying of natural causes to a car shutting down after years of use. Again, reference to older age. The car rusts out, the engine stops, and things stop working over time. Your body eventually just slows down and stops. When natural causes show up on a death certificate, it usually means that the person wasn't diagnosed with any one health condition, like heart failure, disease, or didn't die in an accident. And that's what they want you to perceive. Because they're stating that on the death certificate, this is the cause, it's not indicating anything suspicious. And that's their whole point. They care about the image. Coroners typically come to this conclusion in the absence of an autopsy or known cause of death. And that to me is the most alarming part. And I'll give you another example on this later. They just simply categorize it. Well, he looks like he's just sleeping. It must be natural causes. And that's the whole assessment. No further inquiry needed. Now, I understand if it's somebody encroaching 100, right? But in these circumstances, this specific individual within the Lancashire Constabulary, after all the events of the Nicola Bulley case, in the wake of the final review coming out, pinning him as the one making the decision to put Becky in front of the mic on the vulnerability drop, how is it not suspicious circumstances? But when there are questions about the cause or manner of death, an autopsy, along with other testing, provides the needed information to help improve the determination and manner of death. Cause and manner of death. That's what I'm saying. I think that that's absolutely essential in this case. Now, I'm not saying his family should go out and ask for it. I wouldn't. I mean, Nicola Bulley's family's been quiet. I mean, look what they keep doing. And I'm not saying 100% they're behind all of this, but it should be vetted out appropriately and not just slap-smacked these ridiculous labels that make it look even more suspicious. So I think the further testing would be needed, that further information. Goes on to point out, we usually don't do autopsies on significantly older people. And he says that because typically natural causes refers to older, significant people. Because common sense says if they're younger, you need to look into it further. Right? But nope, not in this case. Not the ACC on Nicola Bulley. What are natural causes? It might not seem to mean much at all, but when a death certificate says a person's death was natural, it is really ruling out the involvement of external causes. The person did not take their own life, and they were not killed by somebody or in an accident such as a car crash or a drug overdose. And this is my thing, okay? Remember Ewelina Sasak, the vet who most likely was the person contacted initially by Penny when she found Willow and saw the number on the dog tag, right, that kicked this whole thing off. One of her statements and fears was that she had fear of getting on a plane and returning home to Poland because she would be poisoned. Where did she get that idea? Now, I'm going to cover her a little bit later because the coroner in that case just suggests she's a delusional woman. And I'm not being insensitive, that's what he said. Where did she get this poisoning idea, right? And why do I say that? Because it is widely known that to off somebody, there are various routes of poison that can be used that are not easily detected. And the fact that in this case, they're not looking into a 50-year-old man who had no health conditions, but just natural, makes me wonder if there's more to it. Where's the forensic toxicology being done? I want to point this out. Fentanyl is the number one killer in America, okay, at the current time. And I think I found this interesting. The fentanyl derivatives cannot currently be detected by routine laboratory drug screening programs. Forensic toxicology assays that identify the specific analyte must be used. And what am I saying with that? Will fentanyl show up in general screenings? It cannot currently be detected by routine testing. A specific test, a forensic toxicology assay designed to identify the specific analyte for fentanyl must be used or it won't show up. I'll take it one further. Only 5% of overdose patients are actually tested for fentanyl, the number one killer of Americans. And this was August 23rd, 2022. And why am I bringing this up? You don't know he's an overdose. Here's the deal, okay? If he was and they test a general screening, it wouldn't show up. You would have to use a specifically designed toxicology instrument to bring something like that up. And I don't know if any of you are aware, all it takes is a pinky's worth, a half of an American dime, a sprinkle of salt amount of fentanyl to kill you. That's it. Drop it in someone's drink, that's all it takes. Shuts down the respiratory system, slows down the cardiovascular system, lights out. There's going to be no signs externally, and it would just appear like cardiac arrest. You would specifically have to target the testing. And further, hope I'm not giving any crazy people out there any ideas, but there's more information on that. From ancient times to the Cold War and even up to today, it's always been a popular method of offing one's enemies, and this is poisoning. Depending on which toxin you go with, you can kill someone slowly and quietly or abruptly and dramatically. I'm not going to go all the way into it. They cite, it's been around for a long time. A lot of people use this route. There's arsenic, right, which is quickly slower. And it makes me think of the Litvinenko case that happened right over there in the UK by the KGB in Russia. And I'm not insinuating that's what's behind this. Makes me think of it. They used thallium, which is radiation, which is a longer, slower burn. But it happens. Cyanide is also another one. So I would say fentanyl and cyanide. You get a large dose. It quickly enters the bloodstream. It converts the poison into different chemicals called, I'm not going to try to pronounce that. The body becomes overwhelmed and it can turn all the poison into that same chemical. At that point, it starts preventing cells from using oxygen and eventually cells start dying off. And a lack of oxygen is not good news for the heart, respiratory system, or central nervous system because all of these essential systems are affected. Point being, those are the most popular methods by secret criminal syndicates. You know, like I said, Russia and the KGB with that Litvinenko. Because number one, it's almost untraceable unless you specifically look for it. And over in the UK, they don't think anything's suspicious unless they have a smoking gun. They're looking at a 50-year-old, oh, must have died in his sleep, natural causes. There'd be no way to screen for it. And is there a specific reason to want him gone? I would contend that that would be a very likely possibility. So why would you not inquire further? further unnatural causes, and this is in regard to coroners and how they come to the decision. You're rather like a judge. You weigh the evidence, and based on the predominance of evidence, you come to a decision, and that, I think, this is what caused the problem. But I'm going to be an honest person and list all the other causes. These other causes appear in a second section of the death certificate for potential contributing causes, which we're never going to get. Do you need an autopsy? In 2016, the decision not to perform an autopsy on Antoine Scalia, who's a previous Supreme Court justice, and I met him. He's a great guy. His court opinions are rather conservative, but he's a phenomenal man, and he did a lot that will go down in history. But not doing an autopsy on him drew criticism because of the many questions surrounding his sudden death, and because he was an important public figure. A county judge determined the death to be natural, despite not even having seen the body. They were going off of most likely his weight, because he was a little bit heftier in age, right? It's entirely possible and acceptable practice to not do an autopsy and call the death natural, as long as by external examination there are no lumps, bumps, bruises, Fowler said. In many cases, based on past medical history and inspection of the death scene, which you can't trust the Lancashire Constabulary in that respect, because they showed us that with Nikki Bulley. And if the person is of the right age, it's not unacceptable, he added. I don't think 50 is the right age. Scalia, for example, had been reported to have heart problems. So you can kind of see how that makes sense in this scenario. However, in the case of a younger person with no history of medical conditions, like Snowden said he's healthy and fit, does he have a history? An autopsy becomes a much more critical part of the process. Young people don't just die suddenly, Fowler said. Now, to be clear, I realize that a 50-year-old doesn't necessarily fall under the overall umbrella as young, but to pass as a result of natural causes, which is typically considered to be normal for those much, much older, medically speaking, 50 years old is young. Not to mention, he was perceived to be healthy and fit. For what it's worth, the average age and life expectancy for men over there in the UK is 80 to 81 years old. Yes, I realize this does not mean much, or that it is a guarantee all males will live on and experience this lifespan, but it's an added stat for consideration. As you just observed and heard me briefly cover, Mr. Scalia, the previous U.S. Supreme Court Justice, in his death was ruled to be due to natural causes, without an autopsy being performed and or further inquiry deemed to be necessary, which still drew strong criticism, despite him being 79 years old, having had a history of heart issues, being a little heftier for his age and height, which, to be fair, are all reasonable factors contributing causes that could be considered to have led to him succumbing to natural causes, right? Yet, criticism was still had. Why? Because of the mere fact he was a high-ranking public figure. Mr. Lawson was too, especially in regard to Nicola's case. However, Mr. Scalia was not fresh off a completely bent and corrupt case. He was not the public lead and gold commander, responsible, at least in part, for the continued cover-up, a central figurehead in a case still unraveling to this very day. He was the one defending the Lancashire Constabulary and their hoax, persisting to try and cast off the beautiful mother of two's truth as some accident. Now, I want to be clear. Yes, I do acknowledge that Mr. Lawson may have had some underlying cause or predisposition that was onsetting or inevitable, but to that I contest would not be deemed as natural causes. A sudden stop, ceasing to exist any longer right then and there. That's not natural causes. Further, maybe he had a taste or indulged in some more risky habits, recreational use of drugs or alcohol and spirits. And I don't mean to speculate here, but it's important to consider and at least take into account, for if so, such would undoubtedly then be acknowledged as a potential contributing factor. I mean, he had to have decompressed somehow. Let's be real here. If Scalia's death drew strong criticism, a 79-year-old with long-standing heart issues for not having had further evaluation, then how and why shouldn't a public league gold commander 30 years younger, appearing to be healthy and fit, whom to our knowledge did not have any long-term withstanding medically related issues? Well, even if he did, that's personal information, mind yous. How dare you? Excuse me? Why? Because he's a male? Mr. Marsh, is that it? You told the one reporter in the College of Policing Review presser that you would not comment on said assertion when the lady asked you if it would be the same if it were a male as far as the vulnerability releases, for her suggestion was merely hypothetical. Well, now you have a realistic example. Please enlighten us. He, Mr. Lawson, was sitting at the very presser, was the one whom selected Becky himself, the lady whom slip-dropped the vulnerabilities. A high-risk menopausal woman struggling with HRT, had drinking issues, and they even cite her previous EMT visit on January 10th, wherein they painted her to have mental health issues. They were leading everyone to conclude she had a tendency for self-fate. They oversold it so hard. Well, it could have been orchestrated by Paul too, but it's their job to vet through that, right? They don't just take the torch and run with it. They also do the same thing with Ewelina Sasak. Just wait, I'll get to her and that medical examiner's misogynistic vomit. It's even worse. Why should Mr. Lawson's personal and medical information be protected when he authorized the complete humiliation of Nicholas? Again, that is not meant to be disrespectful. Rest in peace. It's the truth, valid reasoning that can't be refuted. If that bothers you, then I urge you to go back and put yourself in her two daughters' shoes, having to listen to those headlines and or read those Facebook posts as they continue to grow up. Then come back and pick up where you left off, or you can stay put right here as we are now and listen to what else I have to say, as I do believe it will further support my stance by the time I'm through. And if it still doesn't quite register, then I suggest you move along, because there is no place for the cold-hearted here. Now, I've already spent way more time discussing this aspect than I originally anticipated, but that's okay. I have thoroughly persisted because this is important. The circumstances are suspicious. Natural causes excludes accident, homicide, suicide, and or anything externally forced, unnatural, which does include drug overdose. They want you to believe, by use of a non-medical term, that his cause and manner of death was merely his car hitting its ceiling and simply shutting down. 30 years prior to average life expectancy, a healthy and fit guy with no long withstanding illness and or disease. The circumstances have been reviewed. No need for further inquiry. I started this journey for one sole reason, Nicola Bulley. If you want to believe him and Ewelina Sasak are all separate and apart, then you do you, that's fine. But you see, I have a higher standard and expectation for explanation. Remember, I'm not just raising awareness now. Things have always been off with me in this case. I caught on to these gremlins in the initial stages. My work demonstrates that. The very handling of Nicola's case should alone by itself raise alarming concern. Yet, I'm supposed to accept this truth that coincidentally, Pete, the public lead and Golden Commander, passes due to natural causes. Then the vet, Ewelina, whom was the vet first contacted to kick this whole thing off, despite her expressing fear in the weeks leading up to her death? Yep, she was merely delusional. You've got to be kidding me.
That is one big pile of shit.
Haha, for real though. It's not coincidental in my opinion. It's tying up loose ends. Those so closely associated with this case, directly involved with the timeline or gatekeeping of the officials, don't just seemingly kick the bucket due to natural causes or elect self-fate as they let on. Just because the Lancashire Constabulary or some Majesty's coroner do not and refuse to consider the circumstances as being anything other than ordinary, no further review needed, I quite frankly don't give a rip. That's not me being insensitive. Don't twist this on me. The Lancashire Constabulary, Coroner Adeley's conjecture, the College of Policing's smear campaign, not to mention crime and police commissioners bumble babbling, are to fault. They created the reason for suspicion with Nicola and her life. Their decisions to handle things the way they did, follow through the way they did, play coy, cover up, it's their fault. I'm just putting it out there for the world to see, and if you don't and cannot tell by now, it is only going to continue to happen, unfortunately. Now, I hope that is not being too dramatic for some of you out there. Apparently, I have too much passion and personality. Oh, and shouldn't and can't be trusted because of my use of English. Are you kidding me? It's okay. I get it. Whatever. If you can't poke holes in the issues that I do raise, the things that actually matter, then what else can you do? Last note before moving on. How are the circumstances not warranting further inquiry? He, Mr. Lawson, was tasked with setting the tone for public perception in this case, one which they cite in the IER took a negative trajectory of 459%, a hit of public perception in favor of the Lancashire Constabulary, due to this said vulnerability drop, which they themselves then turn around and implicate Lawson as being the chief culprit. I do find it interesting that Ewelina Sasak referenced a fear of being poisoned. Where did she gather this fear? Was it all in her head, as the medical expert contends? Or was it rooted from some sort of threat? Where did she receive and obtain such indication that such was even a potentiality? I'm genuinely curious. Further, I also find it interesting that in Mr. Lawson's last known public appearance, it depicts him talking about drink and drugs being in people's system, which can lead to accidents and or killing people. It fits the same cryptic in-your-face pattern that was exhibited and teased with Nicola. Just saying. Now, moving along to further support my stance, since I have been covering this case, being from the US, there is one chief perception of UK policing and coroners that I have obtained, especially in the Lancashire district and area, even prior to hearing of Mr. Lawson's news. In fact, I have expressed this very perception previously. Allow me to rapid-fire elaborate. Officials are all too often too swift to cite and determine deaths and missing people as not being suspicious, no third-party involvement, right off rip, often insinuating self-fate or high-risk health cause. Nothing out of the ordinary in regard to specific selective deaths. They don't seem to consider circumstantial evidence to have any value. It's almost as if they require physical evidence first. Then they become open to circumstances. I wonder if they even understand how to gather such or follow said leads. Either there is a smoking gun, it's 1 + 1 = 2, or it was a high-risk misper, accident, or self-fate. It's so shocking to me how minimal they consider the circumstances and circumstantial evidence. Paul and Emma offered up a treasure trove, yet Becky maintained they were her most credible and reliable source. Here are 4 quick snap cases that have molded this perception for myself over the past year. Of course, Nikki Bulley, the river working hypothesis being a lock, prematurely excluding foul play without appropriate assessment. There's men in black all over the place, prior to, during, and after. No signs or evidence of her falling in. There were screams heard. Absolute faith and trust in the partner and close friend. Tunnel vision, biased investigation. Police deny and refuse independent third-party assistance and their findings. Inquest selectively chose whom could and would take part. The coroner ruling a conclusion on pure hypothetical conjecture. absolute fallible basis of scientific knowledge and zero objective evidence substantiated by data. Need I say more? Then we have Rachel Jackson. She spent an evening out with her friends, right? She tells them she needs a breath of fresh air. I'm going to go out on a 10-minute walk or bike ride. One friend stated she hadn't even been drinking or anything of the sort. The next day, the police find her bike, and then a short distance later, her body was found in Avenham Park. Her death was never treated as suspicious. She was a high-risk misper. Ruled self-fate within those first days. The story was dropped. At the inquest, there was no evidence of third-party involvement in Rachel's death. And maybe this is true, right? I'm not saying all of these are crooked, but they all have some lack of care or concern, it seems. Lack of due diligence in regard to effective investigation. Women don't typically choose going out for a bike ride and then being found having fallen off in some park as a typical route if they choose to do such. Just saying. Then, of course, we have Michael Brooks, whom also met his fate in Avenham Park. Not found in a waterway for 2 weeks by police divers, yet miraculously was later found on the 23rd day. And of course, we all know the Rothwell ties there in his visions. At the inquest, one account suggested that he was forced into the water at knife point, while the other expressed that he accidentally fell into the water. But there was witness X who backed out of the testimony in regards to the two men in black holding a knife to his neck. The experts in the authority in the inquest stated they were not able to determine given the contradicting eyewitness accounts. Are you kidding? Why did the witness recant? That lends validity to option number one. He was forced into the water at knife point. They didn't even consider it suspicious circumstances regarding his recovery, not being found, then all of a sudden he appears, just like Nicola. They concluded that his death was an open verdict and it remains unsolved to this day. Much like the high risk, right? They hear drugs and it's almost not worth it. It's sad. Then, of course, we get to Ewelina Sasak. They were quick to conclude self-fate, allude to her being delusional, despite the gruesome scene and severity of her injuries, her ongoing utterance of fear and being followed in her closing weeks. She relocated to a hotel in London based off of said perceptions of fear. She was even afraid to board a plane to return back home to get further away out of a fear of being poisoned. As I have been alluding to all throughout, I have a short excerpt here I want to share to directly show how narrow-minded and inconsiderate this inquest was. Summarizing his verdict, he said, I'm told by Ewelina Sasak's mother that she was a, quote, a very nice girl with a lot of friends. It's also clear to me that she had a good and close relationship with her family. Miss Sasak, meaning the mother, has given evidence about the text messages and numerous conversations she had with Ewelina between the 12th and 25th of April. So it's almost 2 weeks of this exchange between daughter and mother. Those exchanges paint a picture of a fast-emerging situation which rapidly escalated to what can only be described as a state of apparent despair, which saw a situation where Ewelina believed that she was being followed on specifically the date of April 24th by a group of 10 people. I have no doubt that Ewelina did believe that she was being followed. Okay? And this is where you can tell their perception is not being open and fair. What is less clear is the source of that belief, whether it was entirely based in reality or whether it was delusional, either in whole or in part. In the absence of expert medical opinion regarding Ewelina's mental health, which is not possible to obtain after the fact, we will never know the exact facts of the situations and or her beliefs. So they're saying because they can't assess her mental health after the fact, case closed, right? It reminds me of when Becky said, now I can't speak dog, you know? But this already shows you the tone and the opinion of the medical examiner, okay? By a group of 10 people. And I know that sounds outrageous, okay? But usually when you have mental health episodes, they don't last for 13 days. However, what is clear to me is that at the time she checked into this hotel in London to get away, Ewelina was in a state of some fear and distress. I have also borne in mind the nature and extent of Ewelina's injuries, which were, quite frankly, extreme. So he's acknowledging that, okay? If you look at her behavior over the 2 weeks, she's moving further away. She went to London. She's taking the steps that the circumstances show there's something here. I find that nobody inflicts injuries of that severity on themselves as a cry for help or expecting to live, particularly not someone of Ewelina's educational standard. Bearing in mind that as a vet, she was more than familiar with the basic biology and anatomy. He's insinuating that most of the time people wouldn't do this, but because she has experience and education in maybe giving animal surgery, she could be more likely to commit said act. I mean, the logic here is so disgusting. Okay? He's acknowledging they're quite frankly extreme. I find that nobody inflicts injuries of that severity on themselves. In light of these factors, I reject the notion of an accident. What about third-party involvement? And find that on the balances of probabilities, Ewelina inflicted these injuries on herself and that she did so with the intention of taking her own life. You got to be kidding me. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't a mental health related issue, but you can't just conclude, sorry, we can't look into whether or not she was delusional because she's no longer with us, disregard all of the fear that went on for 13 days, and her direct connection with the Nicola Bulley case being the person contacted penny by penny. She had information as to the timeline. Was there something that was said that she could come out with that would cause issues with the official narrative? Right? Why are the circumstances in this case not suspicious? And found that on the balance of probability, what probabilities? She was expressing fear over a 2-week span, went to London to get away from said fear, and was found completely, extremely wounded in a bathtub. Could it not be people from this select group? What did she know? But see, we can't trust the coroner or the police. It's simply a mental health related death. I could go on and on. Somehow, people dying in and around this case, those associated, although their circumstances alone seem suspicious, or one would think they seem to warrant further inquiry, but apparently not so. I just don't understand. There is no way this and these examples can honestly all be authentic assessment and opinion being offered up. It's intentional, deliberate diversion, all leading back to Nicola's case. I don't trust a single letter the Lancashire Constabulary post, nor do I any further evaluation done by some coroner with whom they associate. Sorry. Even if Peter did suffer some medically related incident, such as a heart attack, his presence and role within this case undoubtedly would have antagonized any pre-existing or predisposition he held even 1 year ago before Nicola went missing. The ongoing dumpster fire that is this case indeed had a significant impact and would have no doubt negatively affected his health and mental well-being, which ultimately, in my opinion, only exacerbated any underlying issues that may have been present. To suggest otherwise, that is, it was completely separate and apart, not related in any capacity, is beyond ludicrous. Again, my condolences and utmost respect to him and his family. This energy is not directed towards Mr. Lawson as a person, but at the Lancashire Constabulary and how they continue to handle things. In my opinion, Peter Lawson may have been tying up loose ends. Really think about that. If this case were reopened, who would be assessed harder than anyone? That's right, Mr. Lawson. And to whose benefit does it fall that he is no longer with us? Yeah, that's exactly right. What world are we living in? Circumstances are everything. Now, lastly, before I move on to Paul and Emma, Gaynor Lord. Allow me to share a brief snippet and some words by the press in regards to her case that I want to further discuss.
Norfolk Police's police commander, Wes Hornigold, said our working hypothesis at the moment is that Gaynor is in the water. That's what we're working towards. And they also went on to say it's a missing person inquiry. There's no evidence at the moment to suggest that there's any third-party involvement here. This is a significant operation.
Hypothesis remains that Gaynor has gone into the water. We're doing everything that we possibly can as quickly as we can to find Gaynor.
Our working hypothesis remains that Gaynor is in the river, even though we're exploring other lines, as you'd expect us to keep a very open mind. Intensive search of the river today. Specialist team from Lancashire is also assisting us, so we're putting sonar equipment across the river at the moment, which is...
So you just heard there, one of the officers said, what sounded like Lancashire, but it's not, it's Lincolnshire. I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. There's no way they'd be using their divers. I know most of you are familiar with the area, but from the River Winsome, where Gaynor Lord went missing, to St. Michael's on River Wire is approximately 178 miles, 200 miles, right? So it's completely on the other side of the UK. My first takeaway, and I've only watched like 2 or 3 5-minute clips on this, so I haven't dug all the way into it because I've been working on this and I didn't want to get distracted. But right off the bat, completely alarming. Why are the police once again sharing the working hypothesis with the public? I don't understand. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Hypotheses are a basis for theory, you know, to them behind the scenes and in their investigation and looking into it. A lot of times hypotheses fail in general. They're already sticking their neck out there with their first guess. If she comes home tomorrow, which hopefully she does, and there's an explanation to all of this, they're going to look like idiots. Yes, it's a stark resemblance to the Nikki Bulley case because there's items strewn about, you know, the 2 rings, the white t-shirt, yellow tank top, and this time, however, you have her olive green coat in the water. So it's as if, because the coat's in the water, their working hypothesis she must be in there. I mean, you got to give them credit. There's a little bit more to it than what Lancashire had, but still, what if the same perpetrator, I don't believe it is, but let's say it is, wouldn't you learn that to make it more believable, you toss a coat into the water? I mean, now I understand that there's no third-party involvement. I get that, okay? But just because their coat's in the water doesn't mean it's close-ended. They say they're being open-minded, but so did Lancashire, and they didn't check stuff until 2 weeks later. Now, what's different in this case is they have CCTV from 4 or 5 different locations. Now, I want to comment on that. From the psychology of Gaynor Lord, the first things I pick up on is she leaves her job an hour early, which appears to be like a cashier type of post. So you wouldn't do that. And they reference in one of the videos that she would never do that. She doesn't typically do that. If you're going to leave a post like that, obviously there would be some type of consequences, right? You know, you can't just leave a store unattended. Clearly that didn't matter to her. She also looks to be in a rush, in a hurry. In one of them, you can almost see her run. She kind of cuts through traffic and kind of just rushes. She doesn't wait. There's no patience there. But then, which is really odd, you hear reports that some witness saw her in the park doing yoga. What? Like, yoga is a meditation, a calm, a breathing exercise. Why would you be rushing, leave your job early, to go completely 180 to calm down and do yoga poses? It doesn't match up whatsoever. Like, at all. I don't understand that. Those 2 parts are huge discrepancies to me. The most frustrating part is the police coming out and saying the working hypothesis. Because let's say this did involve other circumstances. And again, they say they don't believe there's any suspicion or no third party involved. I cannot stand how quick they jump to that. Apparently, all you need to do to get away with something there, if you're going to take somebody, you throw something in the water and they're going to believe that's where they're at. And I'm not being a smartass. They show you that's how they work. They tell you their blueprint and their playbook and how simplistic their thought process is. Now, we're what? Almost an entire week now. Today, actually, 7 days. As we learned from Mr. Faulding, if she did go into the water, she's likely going to be where she went in at, roughly. And this river isn't river wire, like narrow. It's considerably wider. So if she went in anywhere near that tent and where you see those swans at, she couldn't have swam very far in either direction because that's a huge river. It's much wider. Yeah, it would take a while to Union Jack search it, right? But if you're not finding her within those first couple days, there's got to be a shift of focus in other explanations. You can't be sitting there 8 days on searching the same quarter mile of water. Like, it's just drives me nuts. Now, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Obviously, the timing and the days. Let's just hope there's no 23-day. Let's hope that she does return and there's an explanation to all of it, like I'd mentioned. But it is eerily similar in how the police are handling this. Openly coming out, but this time they have CCTV photos. They provide recent photos, right? But the items being strewn about. If someone were mugging her, they would take the jewelry. So she take her jewelry off and wanted to go for a swim. That's why she derobed and couldn't quite get the coat off before she went into the water. I just don't. It's hard to conceptualize for me. I haven't spent a lot of time on it, but number one, leaving her job early is out of character. She appears to be in a hurry, which to me instantly makes it high risk, heightened concern. She's in danger. Why did she leave work early? You'd want to look at her conversations. But she's seen doing yoga? That does not make sense. That does not make sense whatsoever. And if you're not finding her in the water, there's got to be an explanation. Is this going to be another Michael Brooks, Nicola Bulley? The police look for 2 weeks, nowhere to be found, and all of a sudden she miraculously pops up? But this time, the police get the tap on the back because they provided the CCTV, they did all that. Well, they still missed the biggest problem in releasing the working hypothesis. Even if she's end up found in that river, you don't reveal that publicly because you're giving the dirty people on the outside insight into how you do things, how operations are handled. You don't share that information, right? Like, if someone was connected to the Nicola Bulley case in this, right? Let's say they went to the other side of the country. They would have learned to make it look further like somebody, because Nicola didn't have anything in the river. This time we'll put a coat in there. And again, I don't want to speculate. I'm not saying they're related at all, because I don't think they are at this point. I've barely even dug into it. But the media's coverage. I remember the Nicola Bulley case was everywhere on my TV. The Sun, the Mirror, the GB News, ITV were constantly putting out coverage of it. Since Nicola Bulley, there hasn't been a single news coverage story like that. Then all of a sudden, Gaynor Lord happens. It's identical from the media channel output. Identical. They're even calling it eerily similar to Nicola. They're using the river working hypothesis. It's almost like they're getting Lancashire out of jail. See, we had no problem using that. They're going to find her in there and justify why they used it. You still don't share the hypothesis. That's a problem. They do appear to be using police tape, cordoning off wider areas of the park, unlike Lancashire, providing more recent photos of Gaynor and the CCTV footage. So, which is weird. It's almost like they filled in every hole that Lancashire had, but they kept using the river wire hypothesis angle, which is very peculiar to me. yeah, we'll have to see how things turn out. Those are my initial thoughts. Leaving work an hour early. She appears to be in a hurry. That's alarming. Doesn't match up with her then going to the park to do yoga. I just don't understand that. Who's that witness, and when was that observation made? It says she was missing at like 8:40, 8:30. Is it dark over there by that time? You know, had she been mugged, the jewelry likely would have been taken. It's almost like set up like the harness on the floor, the phone on the bench, right? It's interesting, the media is exactly the same flavor as it was in Nikki Bulley. Interesting. I'll keep following it, and prayers and wishes out to that family. Hopefully good news comes, but man, they got to figure out something with the way they handle their investigations. You shouldn't be sharing your working hypothesis with the public. That's just not okay. All right, here we are, on to the good stuff I've been waiting to get off my chest and share. So if you recall from my last or previous couple of episodes, If Then with Peter Faulding, if this was in fact the target location identified to be Nicola Bulley by Peter Faulding, which I believe it is, okay? I also said that I believed she was put there, okay? Based on fact, objective analysis with my own eyes. That is not Nicola in that photo released initially by Emma White, then the police. Okay? The CCTV is stitched. I do not believe Nicola went to the river wire that day. I mentioned briefly, Jason said that she was floating upright, and some people misinterpreted that as floating upright, as in on her back. No, upright as in head to the sky, feet to the dirt, standing upright, floating upright, as if she was weighted down. I suggested that after Peter Faulding found her here, they were in trouble because the water wouldn't have raised for 2 weeks, so they couldn't let her come afloat here because it would have brought him back out before Inquest. They would have been screwed. So they had to come up with a plan to shift focus away from the river so that they could move her in a different location to be recovered, right, by Jason Rothwell. I suggested the Marsh Farm Hall interviews and the vulnerabilities presser. I suggested that she was put in here and weighted down so that natural causes of the biological processes wouldn't allow her to also float. Then I suggested sometime around that 15th presser, within those 4 days, maybe held at Marsh Farm Hall, whatever, could have came out this little creek here. She was then put in, Jason was tipped off to find her, okay? Keyword being she was put into the river. Remember, this case has always been, throughout the seams, missing from home and Inskip. The initial post by the River Wire says it. Mr. McKenzie references it, and you just heard Andrew Snowden say it in the final review presser. Missing from home and Inskip. Okay? I believe something happened to her prior to that day. This entire River Wire is a stage, and everybody else is acting. Primarily Paul and Emma. I want you to take a listen to what Emma says here. I'm going to play it. It's very short. I'm going to play it 3-4 times over for purposes of drumming it in. And I want you to really ask yourself, is this something a sincere, close friend would say if they genuinely believed their best friend was either pushed in, fell in, or jumped in under election of self-fate? Alrighty, here you go.
And then you look at the theories behind that are going into, if a victim does go in and drowns, the hypothesis is that they tend to stay where they're put. So then you look at the theories behind that are going into, if a victim does go in and drowns, the hypothesis is that they tend to stay where they're put. So then you look at the theories behind that are going into, if a victim does go in and drowns, the hypothesis is that they tend to stay where they're put. So
Emma states, then you got the theories behind that, but going into, if a victim does go in and drown, the hypothesis is that they tend to stay where they are put. I told you, I knew it. You should have Oh, I had straight goosebumps when I saw that, and that was the night of the 10th. After hearing the Peter Lawson news, I couldn't sleep because my mind juices were flowing. Something wasn't right. So I go back and watch the initial beginning clips. I caught that and I was stunned yet again. I've been telling you all along, she died at her home in Inquest. She was put there. This was the stage. There is no way you would accidentally slip up and say this. It's a major mistake. Emma White was the one in that photo that morning. I've already proved that. The calf sizes, the slimmer one is Emma. The part of the stitch with the ring, Emma. This is why she intentionally conceals it after the fact, which I've also proved. And why Paul came out with the CCTV that same very day, and likewise tried to claim it was him whom handed out the photos, not Emma, trying to take that heat off and away from her. Emma knew Nicola was put in the river. She didn't fall in or was pushed. Nicola's nose was shaved off, so you couldn't and wouldn't compare it with the Emma shot. Nicola passed away at her home in Inquest, and she was then put into that river wire, the stage. Boom! Yahtzee! And that's not even all. Check this one out and see if you can catch it. Emma again.
That perhaps things are narrowing down now in terms of getting Nikki back. What's your message?
Again, yesterday they said they haven't explored all the avenues. We've got footage missing from Garstang Road, which is just outside of the river where you come into the gate for the walk.
Emma says there. Again, they said yesterday they have not explored all of the avenues. We've got footage missing from Garstang Road, which is just outside where you come outside the gate for a walk. Footage was missing from Garstang Road. So, not that they didn't or couldn't catch any, it was missing. Thus, intentionally disrupted and removed. Also, check this post from the Lancashire Constabulary out. It even fleshes it out further. Whilst you may not think you had any relevant information, this is when they're appealing for dashcam. It is really important that we gather as much footage as possible in the area that morning so we can review every piece meticulously to establish whether Nicola can be seen. The footage was missing, just like the caravan park being turned off, CCTV, as well as the Rowan Waters. All three were intentionally turned off. No photo of Nicola anywhere that day. But yet you have the lady with the pram, whether she's up allotment name or not, I don't care. The lady with the red coat, you're missing the point. You have people that are on cameras, and then you have Nicola somehow vanishing into thin air. It was Emma leaving the house that morning. You are led to believe Nicola was there at the river wire that morning, but she never was. Emma states footage was missing from Garstang Road. She tells you right there. They do have footage, but not during that precise window of time. It's missing. Missing. Really makes sense as to why those two individuals were staking that area out the day before when the garage man said they appeared to be suspicious, appearing to cover their faces. They were concocting and figuring out how they were going to pull it off. Was that Paul and Emma? I'll play that again here for you, then I'll move right into another find I have with Paul.
That perhaps things are narrowing down now in terms of getting Nikki back. What's your message?
Again, yesterday they said they haven't explored all the avenues. We've got footage missing from Garstang Road, which is just outside of the river where you come into the gate for the walk.
This piece here featuring Paul, I'm going to play live and stop and explain what I found. All right, this is in regards to his recollection of that morning.
Take us back to 2 weeks today, that morning of Friday, the 27th of January. Yeah. Was it a normal morning like any other?
Totally normal. So the only difference that morning was, usually, when you've got children getting up on a school day, you probably know yourself, it's just mayhem, isn't it?
Carnage, yeah.
Yeah, absolute carnage. So the only difference on that morning 2 weeks ago was that.
So I'm going to point out right here. He should be giving a real description of that morning. Okay? And follow me. This is going to blow your mind. What he actually does, and you can tell he's in deep thought, is he gives a hypothetical situation. Okay? Which shows that he's sensitive about that time frame and it's calculated. Now, you might be like, what the heck are you talking about? Just hear me out. I just want to give you that as a precursor, okay? He's going to give you a hypothetical, right? To play it safe.
There wasn't a lot of rushing. I came down and a lot of stuff was already done. It was, the girls were having a breakfast and everything was pretty much ready to go. I came down, Nikki went upstairs to get ready.
Here's the switch. This is where it becomes a hypothetical, and I'm going to prove it to you. I went upstairs, Nikki came down. Ready?
And then, the routine is basically if Nikki's taking...
The routine is, basically, he switches into hypothetical. He's not actually giving you a description of that morning. Okay? And I'm going to prove it. I'm just explaining it to you. I hope that makes sense.
The girls and Willow, when I hear her come down, I'll get them in the car, get them strapped in, get Willow in the boot and all that. And
see, the problem is in the photo of Emma coming out of the house, she has Willow. She has Willow. That's how you can tell he's giving a hypothetical. Because he said the routine is basically, when Nicola's taking them, I'll get the girl strapped in, Willow in the boot. Emma is walking out of the house with Willow that morning. So he can't be giving you an exact recollection. Why would he lie and give you a basic routine and not what actually happened that morning? Look at that photo. That's Emma and Willow. He didn't put Willow in the boot. Listen to that again.
The routine is basically if Nikki's taking the girls and Willow, when I hear her come down, I'll get them in the car, get them strapped in, get Willow in the boot and all that. And Nikki comes out, give her the keys and off they go.
But that's not what happened that morning. Because Nikki, air quotes, has Willow with her, which we know it's Emma. Why did he just give you a hypothetical, basically, routine is? Why didn't he give you an exact reflection of what happened if he's innocent and doesn't know Nikki wasn't there that morning? Yahtzee. I'll watch him here. He nervously rubs his leg because he's calculating whether or not he was successful with his bullshit.
Machine normally, and sometimes you walk the dog and take the kids to school, and on that morning it was Nikki's job. Yeah, and then if it's my job, usually the roles are reversed. Yeah.
So if you're taking them, then Nikki puts the girls and straps them in and puts Willow in the boot, and then you come out and she hands you the keys, and then you're off. Bullshit. I've already showed this before, but just to detail it again, it shows that Emma knows the timeline way too tightly.
It seems that this is completely out of character to just disappear without saying anything to anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we look at the routine she's done on the day. She's on a work call. She's quickly arranged a play date just 1 minute before. We're seeing it at the weekend. They've got plans for next. It's all it doesn't make sense. She's quickly arranged a play date just 1 minute before. We're seeing it at the weekend.
She quickly arranged a play date just 1 minute before. I'm not saying she couldn't have remembered that with the information that came out in the timeline that was created by the police, but come on. Looking back now on what we know, that was all by design beforehand. And here, Emma reveals that they already had planned what they were going to do on day 7.
Heard what the police had to say. What went through your mind?
Let's just take you back to yesterday. So yesterday was a 7-day milestone. It was a roller coaster in itself. You wake up, still no news. Okay, we'd already planned the 7 days, a big media publicity. We were out there with the banners.
We already planned the 7 days. media publicity, the banners, the whole lot. And I know other people have pointed this whole tennis ball bit out before, but just to listen from her perspective as the close friend, how certain she is that Nicola, on that day, what if Nicola decided to bring the ball? But listen how concrete, assured she is.
Would do on dog walk. What do you think about that theory?
Willow used to love a tennis ball very much, but it used to disturb the walk, so they haven't had a tennis ball since way into last year.
She's like got it memorized, you know? Like Nicola would go and tell her, well, yeah, Willow used to like it, but we don't bring it anymore.
Tennis ball, she loved the tennis ball, so she'd always be by you, pestering you for the ball. But it wasn't a nice walk when the dog's pestering, so the ball...
It wasn't a nice walk. Wow, she just tells you, it's like your little parrot on her shoulder.
Always definitely no ball.
Okay, well that's really interesting. As a dog owner, I know how annoying it can be having dogs obsessing over balls. So you don't think there would have been a ball?
No.
Okay, and fine.
She's so sure because she's the one who staged Willow. Of course, I can't make a contemplation of all this and not include the gym short logic and then the as we were going to leave.
So, I go to the gym on a Friday lunchtime. So I quickly got my gym stuff on because I just thought basically I'm going to go out, find her, come home, do a bit of work.
Carry on.
Yeah, lunchtime, go to the gym.
So you would change into your gym shorts after you do a bit of work.
We're going to leave.
We were going to leave.
We're going to leave. The most obvious thing, of course, has always been the river. It's always been my gut instinct and her sister's.
That's what you wanted people to believe, because that's what you staged.
And family that isn't the case. Extensive.
Remember, this is at this point the 15th when they're trying to shift focus away. That wasn't the case.
Searching, is probably well aware of what's gone on in that river. I mean, they were in there. I have to categorically say I cannot fault the police in any of this. They have been incredible, and the relation.
How? Because they didn't let Peter Faulding dive 7 days before this? They didn't let him return with his sonar technology? Because that's what I think.
That we have working on this is very, very strong. It's very good. So that this isn't any criticism of them at all. I want to make that clear. But the fact that they were in the divers and underwater rescue team and all that were in that river on the day, and thankfully found absolutely nothing in the part where you would, I guess, have to presume is her last known location. If you take all those things into account, the unlikeliness of it, you would have to sort of say that really the river isn't what happened. And so we always felt that.
See, that makes me think that Nicola wasn't placed in there yet that day. He was going to allow that first day for them to search everything, right? Then place her there. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying, just listening to that now, his logic, and every time I pause, look at him, he's in deep thought, makes me think this is what his plan was. You would have to think that, since she wasn't there the first day, then she was placed.
The mobile phone and the harness and everything, it could possibly be a decoy.
And you know they are.
Again, we don't have evidence.
No, but these are things that you naturally would think about, because the team's call was still active at the time, wasn't it? And
every time he says something he's not sure he shouldn't, he rubs the hell out of his leg. Did you see that?
Willow's harness is on the floor, and I'm sure these are things that constantly you're thinking about.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, the only thing we're bothered about is finding her. nothing else matters. That's the only thing that we're bothered about, is just finding her. So, for me, personally, and again, this is just my opinion, I'm 100% convinced it's not the river. That's my opinion.
I suppose the question after that is, what then? And and the difficulty is, you allow
Marsh Farm Hall interviews. You're 100% convinced. Yeah, because you're trying to shift focus away from the river.
It's horrendous, because people don't just vanish into thin air. It's absolutely impossible. So something has happened. Something has happened. Find out what it is.
You know.
Find out what it is. There has to be a way to find out what happened. There has to be. You cannot walk your dog down a river and just vanish into thin air. Something happened that day. Something.
Yep.
Find out what it is. And my plea now is, personally, I want every house, every garage, every outbuilding, the land scrutinised. I want it all searched. I want it all scrutinised. Every piece of it. And you're not going to appease me with anything else. That is what I want to happen. Because for something to have happened there, it's not many. You would only know that area by local people. It's a local area. We walked down there for years, and I mean years. You see the same faces every single day, and on the very odd occasion when you see somebody that you don't know, they stand out like a sore thumb.
He's trying to shift attention away from that river so they can move her, because Peter, 7 days prior, located her.
Publicity around Nikki's disappearance, isn't there? And I suppose you are one of those stories that is very much talked about on social media at the moment. I don't know whether you've read the stories, the accusations, all the theories that are out there. Does that upset you, or are you happy that people are talking about and trying to find a solution?
It would be upsetting, of course, if I let myself read it all. Don't get me wrong, I have seen some stuff. Most people have been amazing.
Yeah.
You're always going to get that 2% of people that, for whatever reason.
It reminds me, Peter Faulding said in the interview, you're always going to get that 2% of idiots, kind of like that 2% over there in the stacks with their head up. But have you ever seen a spouse in a situation like this answer a question and just so nonchalantly say, yeah, you can question me all you want?
Say and do not very nice things, but I don't want to give any energy to that. Like, my energy is just finding Nikki. I read one that said the police need to look at the partner.
Like, why would you suggest that?
And I'm sort of like, well, yeah, that's the first thing that they do. Like, of course it is.
Yeah.
Like, I knew that would happen.
You knew that would happen? When? When did you know, Paul, that would happen? When you texted her and asked her if she was lost? I don't understand. What do you mean you knew that would happen? What are you thinking, brother? Is that when you were preparing to get away with murder?
On the first day.
And you expect that, don't you? Yeah.
I expect.
I knew that would happen on the first day. I expected it, yeah.
I said to them, do it, and get that out of the way, and then focus on
finding her.
On finding her, and focus on the rest of it. So that's exactly what we did. It was that was done, ruled out, obviously, and then
obviously
move on. So, whatever people want to say, and if that's what they want to think, that's their business. It's not mine.
Well, I'm pretty sure it is your business too there, partner. All right, so can I sit here and say beyond all doubt that he, in fact, took Nicola's life? No, I cannot. What I can say is that Emma White and Paul Ansell both knew that Nicola did not fall in, did not elect self-fate, or was not pushed in. She was put into that river that morning. The photo of air quotes Nicola leaving the house is not Nicola, everyone. It's Emma. The whole river wire is a stage. Now, as far as the specific details, are the police in on it? Did covert Becky Smith help them stage all this? Was an election of self-fate that Paul led Emma and the police to believe, and they worked in on this contract together to expend all these resources and money to dwindle down that $200,000 domestic violence fund they had yet to spend, because if you don't use it, you lose it, right? I can't get to the specifics of that. I don't know. But what I do know is that there was footage missing from Garstang Lane. Emma says she was put there, right? It's riddled all throughout the case that it was scripted narrative between Paul and Emma for certain. Now, I remember in the beginning there was people saying that there was bulletins up for crisis actors. Okay, is that what's going on? Very well could be, because I don't want to give Lancashire Constabulary any credit because they haven't really given me a reason to give them any, but there's no way they're this incompetent and can't see through it. They're in on it. Something's staged and worked together, right? But here's the thing. Nikki Bulley was a real person. She was a loving mother of 2 people. What happened to her? Because it was not the river wire. It was not an accident, Mr. Adeley. How dare you conclusively close this? It's disgusting. Oh, let me guess, you're in on the narrative too, right? Wonder what you guys all got paid. It's disgusting. It's so disgusting. Now you have this Gaynor Lord case popping up, and you have the same type of situations popping up. And I was thinking, why would the police go and use the river working hypothesis again? Well, you'd use it again if you knew that's where you're eventually going to find her, because you don't lose any skin off your back. Because that's so alarming. Typically, competent police wouldn't do that. Why are they doing it again 200 miles southeast? Now they have the CCTV footage. They have all this stuff. They're filling in all the gaps, right? I'm not saying they're the same thing, but it's weird. Very weird. Like I've showed you with the Ewelina Sasak, or I hope I'm not saying her last name right. I apologize for that. But for the coroner and medical examiner to determine her to be delusional because she has anatomy and biology experience of knowing where to cut because of her vet experience. Oh, she did it to herself. You gotta be joking. Pete Lawson, rest in peace. You really think he died Sunday morning? Natural causes just struck? I don't think so. I don't think so. They can't let whatever this is come undone and be revealed, because they'll never be able to recover from it. That's why I think they're tying up loose ends. Now, Paul seems to be rather confident and not suspicious as to him getting wrapped up and being thrown away, right? So that makes me think that he and the police are in on it together. They're supporting each other, right? My opinion, he did something to her because he got tipped off because of the fund. It's all been staged as this self-fate. He staged it as self-fate, and they're just helping him run this whole story, right? He can still get life insurance because she didn't choose self-fate. Lancashire Constabulary can spend their money. That's what I think's going on here. I don't think she committed it herself. I think her life was taken. All right, everybody. This one took me a while. Prayers and wishes out to the Lord family. I hope good news comes that way. And that the police this time around aren't bent and tilted. But there are some things that bother me about that. Let's hope it straightens out. Merry Christmas, everybody, if I'm not back until then. Until next time, Mind Juice out.